Okay, this is the helper video for set 1 and set 2, the worksheet that is going to reintroduce you to point slope form. So the first thing we need to remind ourselves is what the heck is point slope form anyway? Point slope form is really a formula. It doesn't really give you very much information, and it's usually used to try to get to slope intercept form. So we always, when we were doing this work earlier before the MCAs, we would write that our goal in the end was always to get our equation to look like y equals mx plus b, right? You'll have to excuse my red is going to have to be the pink for now. But our goal was always to get y equals mx plus b, that format. And one of the pathways to do that is to start with point slope form, to start with the formula I'm going to give you, and then turn that into an equation that looks like this. So the formula for point slope form looked something like this. It was, or is, y minus y1, which we circled in blue, equals m parentheses x minus x sub 1, which we circled in pink. Okay. And the y1 and the x1, remember this is pronounced y sub 1 because the 1 is down below, like a submarine goes down below the water. This is x sub 1. These two circled items get replaced with the values that you get from an xy coordinate. This is called point slope form because the two things you need to make it work are an xy coordinate pair or a point, and you need a slope to make it work. So therefore they call it point slope form. Your x up here will become that circled x sub 1. Your y up here will become that circled y sub 1. We do a little math work and eventually we end up over here. Okay, this is letter E. This is the first one. And what I've got for letter E are three things that I need. I have an x value, I have a y value, and I have a slope. And if I have those three things, I can use point slope form. So I am going to recopy my formula just from up above. Just as is, and I copied it all in black because I want to emphasize the things that I need to replace. I need to replace y sub 1 with my y value from my point. I need to replace x sub 1 with my x value from my point, and I need to substitute 2/3 where my m is, where that slope is. So when I rewrite again, what I'm going to end up doing is replacing y sub 1 with 0. I'm going to replace my m with 2/3. And I'm going to replace my x sub 1 with -3. Now, one thing we learned the first time we did this is that our minus that comes with our formula has to be there. And this circled item is going to become -3, which would look like minus -3. Nobody really likes minus negatives because they create kind of a problem when you're trying to do math correctly. So what we learned is that you are allowed to replace minus a negative with plus. minus a negative 3 gives you the same answer as plus 3. So we change minus negative to plus. So now if we do a little simplifying, we really don't need minus 0. We don't need to write that at all. So we've got on the left y equals, now we've got to deal on the right hand side here with all of this here. And we're going to do the same thing we would do when we were solving equations. That's why we went over all that stuff last week. What we know is that we've got to multiply 2/3 times x, and then we've got to multiply 2/3 times 3. So 2/3 times x is really easy, because what that looks like, math-wise, is just 2/3 next to an x. And now you've got your slope, right? 2/3 becomes that yellow slope, because it's right next to x. The next thing we need to do is multiply 2/3 times positive 3. So you can do a little fraction math off to the side. Some people will be able to do this in their heads, others won't. My fraction math, I'm going to go off to the side and write 2/3 times 3 over 1. One important thing to remember with slopes and with multiplication is that a regular 3 is always over 1. Any whole number you can write as that number over 1 if you need it to look like a fraction, because when we multiply the numerator times the numerator. So 2 times 3 equals 6. And then we multiply the denominator times the denominator. So 3 times 1 is 3. And then we usually take a look to see, can we do 6 divided by 3 and get a whole number? We can, and that is 2. So 2/3 times 3 over 1 equals 2. So we're going to come down here and just enter that answer in our equation. And if you kind of take your colors or your highlighters and you go over, you have your blue y, you have your yellow slope, you have your pink x, and you have your green b. Y equals mx plus b. You've gotten it. Okay, now there's another type of problem that you can solve with point-slope form. And that problem is a problem where you don't have a slope yet, but you have 2 points on a line. You know from looking at all of the equations and the lines and graphs you did yesterday, all you really need to find a slope is 2 points. And if you have your old tools packet, you'll remember that the way that we found slope when we had 2 points was by making a mini table and looking for our change in y and our change in x. So what we're going to do here is we are going to transfer this point of 6, 2 right down here into the first row. We're going to write 6, 2. And then we're going to transfer our second point, 3, 7, down to the second row, 3, 7. Okay. And our goal now is to find a slope, which is yellow, by calculating our change in y over our change in x. So our change in y is located on the right-hand side, where all of our y numbers are, and what we have to do is figure out how we move on the number line from 2 to 7. So if I think about it, on the number line, to go from 2 to 7, I'm going up the number line 5 spaces. So that means that my numerator of my slope is positive 5. Going over to my x, to move from, my change in x will be from 6 to 3. I'm now going down the number line. So I'm going to go down 3 spaces. One of the main things I do when I'm done calculating a slope is to examine, is this either a whole number that I can divide by another whole number. 5 divided by 3 is not something I can divide evenly, so that won't work. I also have to check and see, is this a reducible fraction? Can I divide 5 by something and divide 3 by the same thing? And that's not true for either of these. So this looks like my simplified slope right here, 5 over negative 3. So now that I've got a slope, what I need to do is go back and select one of my points that I'm going to use. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to choose the first one just because. And I need to decide that this is the point I'm going to use for that x sub 1, y sub 1 stuff that's in my formula. I'm going to write out the whole formula again here because we're still not really good at it yet. Okay. And the three things that I'm going to have to replace, I'm going to replace my y sub 1 with this y value of 2 that I chose. I am going to replace my slope with the slope that I just calculated, 5 over negative 3. And then I'm going to replace my x sub 1 with the x value that I chose from the first one. I have to stick with one of the 2 points, so I'm sticking with this one. I'm going to go through and do that substituting, take out the circled letters and replace them with numbers. Okay. So I've got a couple things I've got to do, and most of the time I can't do anything with this until I've taken care of this whole parentheses situation on the right. So once again, I'm going to have to multiply this fraction, 5 over negative 3 times x, and then 5 over negative 3 times negative 6. So let's do the first part. That's really easy. Negative 5 thirds times x is negative 5 thirds x. Doesn't really matter where you put the negative as long as you make sure there's a negative in this one, there's a negative in this one as well. Now I need to do negative 5 thirds times negative 6. That minus kind of makes that a negative. So I'm going to do a little fraction math. I'm going to go down below my slope work, and I'm going to take negative 5 thirds. Again, it doesn't matter where my negative goes, but it has to be there, times negative 6 over 1. So I start with my numerators. Negative 5 times negative 6 is positive 30. 3 times 1 is 3. And now here's where I have to take a look. Can I do 30 divided by 3 and get a whole number? Yep, that is going to be 10. So my answer to negative 5 thirds times negative 6 is actually 10. So I'm going to go over to my equation. It's a positive 10, so I'm going to use a plus. Okay. And now I can come back and recopy what was on the left. Sorry. Y minus 2. So the only thing left to get my equation looking like my goal equation is I've got to get rid of this negative 2 that's sitting here. And we know from our equation work that in order to get rid of a negative 2, I can add a positive 2 to this side, and I can add a positive 2 to this side. So I'm using those skills that we went over last week with solving equations. The same moves I can make to that type of equation, I can make on this type of equation. Y equals negative 5 thirds x plus 12.